Welcome back to this very special episode of The Tea, the show where we dive into the stories behind the headlines. I'm your host, Myriam Francois. Now, over the past few weeks, the Trump administration has revoked more than 300 student and visitor visas, directly targeting pro Palestinian voices on college campuses. Now, US mainstream media is mostly framing this as a crisis of the First Amendment. But beyond, of course, valid concerns about free speech and, upholding the US Constitution, the question surely is, why is protesting an ongoing genocide being treated as a threat to national security? What kind of future are we walking into if peacefully protesting a genocide is now treated as an act of war? To help us unpack it all, I'm joined by one of the people who is at the center of this
Mhm.
controversy. Momodou Taal is a British-Gambian PhD student in Africana Studies at Cornell, who found himself at the center of this storm. Suspended, targeted, and eventually forced to leave the US, his story raises urgent questions about repression, resistance, and what solidarity really costs. So, welcome to the team, Amadou. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Miriam. It's an honor and privilege to be on your show and with you.
Oh, thanks, Momodou. So, obviously, for people who don't know, we actually have known each other
Yeah,
for a few years.
right.
I have been on Momodou's podcast before. Momodou has a podcast called The Malcolm Effect, which I highly recommend. And we'll circle back to some of that because, of course, your position is rooted in long-standing ethical positions that you've been advocating for a very long time. So, I guess the first thing I want to ask you is, how are you? And I know you can't tell us where you are, but
Yeah,
are you safe? And how did you end up where you are now?
absolutely. Thank you so much, once again. I'm safe. I'm well. I'm probably the best I've been in a very long time, if I'm being honest with you. Yeah, I mean, it was a very abrupt decision to leave, and we can talk about what led up until that moment to leave. But yeah, it became as I said in my statement, it became to the point where we saw the flagrant disregard for court orders time and time again from Trump. And then it got to a point where I no longer had faith that even with a temporary restraining order, even with a habeas corpus, which the court declares that the person in question or person in custody cannot be moved across state, I had no faith that that was going to be okay.
Oh,
I had no faith that if a judge even rules in my favor with my habeas and my temporary restraining order, that I was going to now be able to walk around New York City. And I think weighing up these options, I said, you know what? I'm going to stop gambling with my freedom at this moment because I think the conversations we were having with my legal team, even though, and I'll reveal it here, you're getting like the first time I'm speaking about everything behind the scenes. So I think it's
we
quite
like an
apt.
exclusive.
Exactly. I think it's quite apt that it's called the teak.
Right.
I'm going to be spilling a lot of it today. So,
Amazing.
but I think honestly, like, my legal team didn't know I was leaving. They couldn't know because obviously, again, they were given a notice to appear. I was issued notice to appear, meaning that they were told to surrender me to ICE custody.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yeah, and I can talk about how that all went down in a short moment. But basically, effectively, it got to the point where my legal team just said that if we lose the next case, the next hearing, our leverage to negotiate for you to voluntarily depart is basically diminished or
Okay.
significantly lowered. And at that point, I said, you know what? The name is prominent now. My case is so high profile, and this government loves a spectacle. So I felt that they were going to make an example out of me. And I thought, you know what? I'm not trying to rot in a prison in Louisiana and also even El Salvador.
Right. I mean, it could be El Salvador. Yeah. I mean,
Exactly.
at this point, who even knows? So, for people who aren't fully familiar with your case, tell us how you have ended up at the center of this storm. Because, in theory, on paper, you are kind of the ideal candidate for an American university. I mean, you're the kind of person people put on the front page of the prospectus to say, come and study here. Am I right?
Thank you so much. You're too kind.
It's true,
Um,
though.
no, but it was so, I mean, again, I love my studies. I still love my studies. I'm
Yeah.
praying that I can finish. So far, I should be able to finish. We'll see what Cornell does. But fundamentally, ever since October 2023, I've been involved in protests on campus. I've been involved in speaking, teachings. We had a long-standing campaign for divestment, for example. And then, we had series of escalations, building occupations, all non-violent, obviously. And I think it's important to set out at the outset, I've not been charged with a crime. I've not been alleged of any crime, alleged of any violence, nor have I been arrested. So to think about all of these things combined, and I'm forced to leave the country, right? All because I dared to speak up, as you said, against the genocide.
Mm.
Literally, all I've done, right? So I guess I was suspended it for my in the encampment in April 2024. I was a negotiator. And I think up until that point, even my suspension, the encampment went up on day one, and I was suspended on day one.
Oh,
Because I think
wow.
my university had identified me as someone who's I guess a loudmouth in many ways. I can't keep quiet. But then, I was reinstated with several conditions. I was banned from campus still. And then in September 2024, we had like a protest. It was to kind of shut down a careers fair in which there were two companies there doing recruitment, L3 Harris and Boeing, who we know are not just complicit, but are facilitating and helping materially support in Israel in their genocidal assault against Gaza. I was suspended. I was at the protest for like 5 minutes, suspended. There was a huge public outcry because I was going to be effectively deported then.
Yeah.
And then Cornell relented, banned me from campus, but allowed me to finish my degree and keep my visa.
Yeah.
Fast forward, then Trump says in the campaign trail, if you attended these pro-jihadi protests, we are going to find you and deport you. So I'll be honest with you, it was at that moment and when he was elected, I thought my time in America was going to become limited.
Okay.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
at that point I thought, you know what? And then again, Beta, which is like a right-wing organization, Canary Mission, they would like daily tag Marco Rubio and say, why haven't you deported Momodou yet?
Oh,
Why
wow.
haven't you deported Momodou? Daily tagging me, right?
And this was a pattern that we've observed, isn't it?
Yep.
Of people being tagged, of Marco Rubio being tagged, and then those people then
Yep.
being marked for deportation. Because, of course,
Literally.
in any good democracy, that's how you decide who gets deported.
Exactly. Like no due process, no, and they're not even trying to hide it. And we can talk about the political moment a bit more, but just to kind of wrap up this kind of fast forward the story.
Yeah.
So then we decided, okay, what kind of protection do we have? In any, again, as you said, in any normal functioning democracy, you have redress at the court. You have recourse to the courts, right? So then I think from about the inauguration, we thought about, okay, maybe a potential lawsuit. Then, when he signed the executive orders combating anti-Semitism on campuses, which first made it, we can deport people for effectively being anti-genocide. And
Yeah.
then secondly, making it incumbent upon universities to act as collaborators and I had no faith in my institution, given that they were willing to place a target on my back.
Wow. So can I just roll back a slightly on that?
Yeah,
So, I mean, for those people who are not familiar with the US educational system, is Cornell not kind of known as a sort of bastion of activism and
yep,
African American sort of
yep.
thought leaders, and just paints us a picture of like Cornell as people think of it? And then tell us a little bit about what your experience actually was as a Black British student on that campus in terms of being protected by that
Yeah.
institution or not.
So Cornell is located on the traditional Gaia-Kahana indigenous land, which is important because again, it's a land grab university, one of the largest in the countries, 1 million acres of lands dispossessed from the indigenous folk. It is a beautiful campus, one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. And I remember writing an op-ed and I was thinking about my time. And I was thinking, when you walk across Cornell's campus, there are certain monuments commemorating its rich history of activism. And I thought to myself, if these monuments could speak today, they will definitely be saying that, carry on. This is what this place was supposed to be about. My own department, Africana, and just for people who don't know, Africana, which is also Black Studies, but the reason why it's called Africana, it focuses on Blackness, but not tied to any specific geography. So it's Africa, the diaspora, the Caribbean, Latin America, anywhere Black people are found, we have a focus of that's our unit of analysis. My department was founded by, which was called the Willard Straight Takeover, which is a building on Cornell's campus. this was a 36-hour armed takeover. Black students picked up guns and said, "You have to give us our department." There was no suspension that took place from those protests.
You
The
don't say.
Cornell University negotiated and established a department. We have to hear ad nauseum from the Liberals administration at Cornell our rich legacy of Vietnam protests, our rich legacy of anti-apartheid. And but I would like to say Cornell never divested from apartheid, actually
Ooh,
in
okay.
South Africa. But
Yeah.
again, we already understand how liberals have they reinterpret history and reimagine things that never took place, right? Because again, at the time they were suppressing the voices like they're doing now. In 20, 30 years' time, when Palestine is free, I'm sure they're going to be like, we had such a rich and robust activist tradition. Cornell says its official slogan is any person, any study. They're meant to like value academic freedom like no other institution. The
Mm.
irony being, the year in which the genocide started, Cornell has a theme every single year picked by the president. And the year that was picked by the president was Freedom of Expression year, right?
Wow.
And why? Because again, it was the right wing people who were complaining about the left being the snowflakes and the left being intolerant and canceling people that we have to now we have to, I guess, reestablish our commitment to free speech. But again, we already know that free speech, except for Palestine, right? We already know we have a Palestine exception. So that paints Cornell for me, for you,
Wow.
for the listeners as well.
And
Um,
and
yeah,
so just so you can clarify, so I remember seeing a video of I think it was you on campus, and uh, it wasn't clear whether there were ICE agents on campus. Like, were there people literally after you? Like, you're a
yeah,
student. There were
yeah.
agents after you.
Yeah,
Like, that must have been terrifying.
it was like the most, and again, this is again, I haven't said this publicly yet. So we filed the lawsuit on Saturday, I think 15th of March. The day after, we get a credible tip that the FBI and DHS are looking for me.
The FBI is looking
The
for you,
FBI,
Mamadou.
yeah,
I
the
mean,
FBI, literally, the FBI are looking for me. And I think at that point we were like, shit, because are they gonna try and get me for material support for terrorism?
oh dear God.
Yeah. So
That's
that's
some
like
Gitmo
yeah,
sentence.
literally. So like my lawyers were like, okay, you have to sleep with our numbers in your pocket. You have to, and I was with my lawyers at the time. They're like, listen, you have to leave right now because if they come and they arrest us as well, you have no legal team. I had to sleep with my medicines in my pocket, right? I had to like not out. It was a whole like again, this is what I'm trying to say. It was like people see only the interviews, but they're not really hearing what it was like behind the scenes for me,
Right.
right? Like so then literally, so I'm hearing the FBI and DHS are literally coming for me now. So I had to like dip. Obviously, I can't say where I was, but I was in hiding. I was in hiding with some good friends. No one knew where I was, and we can go into a bit about what that experience was like effectively 2.5 weeks in captivity underground,
You were on the
right?
run.
Yeah, literally. So then that happens on Sunday. Monday, ICE agents turn up to my house. Three unmarked vehicles positioned at three strategic locations at the exits. I wasn't at home,
Thank God
but
for that.
they turned up. Then my housemates approached them, and then my housemate said, "What are you doing?" They just flashed the badge, like just like say police, and then they dipped off. Right? That was on the Monday. Wednesday, we get an email. And by the way, this is all before the hearing has taken place. I haven't even had my chance for the hearing yet, right? And the
Mm.
government's lied and said that this is not retaliation. We plan to deport him a day before he filed his lawsuit, which is obviously nonsensical.
Mm.
No one believes that. But
So,
that was if yeah.
so there's an exceptional process, essentially, is what you're saying, that's underway here, where you're not actually charged with any wrongdoing. You don't get to plead your case, and there are FBI agents turning up and ICE agents turning up to try and deport you even before you've been able to have your moment in court. I mean,
Yeah.
and I almost want to say, I know I don't mean to minimize anything you're going through, but you're almost like one of the lucky ones, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I am. Honestly, I am absolutely one of the lucky ones. And I think my fantastic legal team, and not just my legal team, but I have a very solid, trusted network because anything could have gone wrong. Anyone could have slipped up and said, "We know where he is," or if, like, I'm telling you, if I went the lengths that we had to go to, checking is someone following cars, changing cars. Like it was a whole operation like felt like a
Wow.
movie. But looking back now, I'm like, oh, okay, that was actually quite like a movie, like a flipping spy movie or something, right? But it really was like we had to check, and I'll tell you how I left the country, etc., because that was a whole thing as well. But it was literally like we had to like, okay, who's this person? Momodou, wear a mask. Momodou, wear a hoodie. Momodou, make sure you not any clothes that can identify you as before. Like it was a whole operation that had to like be on the run effectively on the run. So then on the Monday, I stayed inside my house. Wednesday, we get an email from the DOJ, personally, DOJ. Can you arrange
DOJ, Department of
Department of
Justice.
Justice, which is like obviously the, where all the kind of federal agencies of law enforcement come under,
Yes.
saying, can you come and surrender your client to ICE custody, please? And then my lawyers were like, no, we haven't even had our day in court yet. Like, are
Hmm.
you for real? But they're like, yes, we know. And basically they were saying that, and this was, I can't lie, I felt a bit gassed at this point. They were like, we can't find your client. So can you surrender him? I'm talking
Like,
about, I mean, I was there using my VPNs, location services
oh
off,
yeah,
no
of
face, no,
course.
no face ID. I wasn't using
Yeah.
any of my devices. Like it was a proper like, like an
Wow.
underground, like a real underground moment, right? I mean, I even had like my friends telling me they walk into the coffee shop and people are talking. I heard Momodou's in Ithaca. I heard Momodou went to the south. I heard Momodou like
I, and all the meanwhile, you're in the back of the car hiding, laying low.
exactly.
So how did you end up leaving the country? Are you able to divulge how that happened and what the
Yeah,
process
yeah,
was and why I guess you made that decision? What was the kind of turning point?
absolutely. So on the Friday, I got an email from the Secretary of State, DOJ. Your visa's been revoked. This is a week after we filed the lawsuit. All before the hearing still. We had hearing, we lose our motion in the hearing. The judge basically says, and Momodou can still fight his lawsuit from detention.
Oh wow.
And my lawyer was like, I'm an immigration lawyer. That could mean up to 2 years of being detained
Oh my
before
goodness.
before you get your day in court. So I said, okay, so then we filed a second temporary restraining order, and the judge was also basically saying, I don't think I have jurisdiction. So we filed something that gave her jurisdiction, right? And I want to note this is a Democrat Biden judge, by the way, just to know. Just a side point. I think it's crazy that judges are political appointees in this country.
That's
But
yes, indeed. Yeah.
but long story short, so then on the Monday, Monday just gone. No, Sunday night, my lawyers met with me and said, listen, best case scenario, we win in court on next hearing, but we can't guarantee the government is going to listen. And you could still be detained and you still be fighting this. Secondly, if you lose, your leverage to negotiate your voluntary departure is severely diminished. So these are the options in front of you. They were very honest and said the lawyer in them wants to continue the fight. But I said to myself, I think I made my political point, and it's very abrupt. I think I made my political point, and I think now I'm just gambling with my freedom, and I don't trust the government to listen. So long story short, about 11 p.m. on Sunday, called up a friend from Atlanta. I said, "What time can you get to New York?" You know,
Atlanta come through.
yeah, they came through for me, packed as much as I could, and then we headed out of the country. And people will soon I'll say when I'm back in the UK, I can detail like where I went to and where I am. But right
Of
now, I don't want.
course. Well,
Yeah,
for now, we will keep your location
yeah,
secret, top secret.
mhm,
I guess maybe some people might be wondering, Mamadou, why you would take such huge risks with your career, with your life.
mhm.
What motivated you to, you know, go so far that today you find yourself, being hunted by the FBI?
Yeah. As you said, genocide, man. I just feel like I feel like any world that allows the slaughter of 18,000 plus children is no world at all. And I think to myself, I do, again, I think people have been commending the bravery, courage, all that, and I appreciate it. But I don't, if anything, I'll be honest, I feel a sense of shame because I'm like, we've been doing all of this and the genocide is still ongoing. I'll be totally honest with you. And I'll be also totally honest as well, hand on heart, up until the moment I chose to leave, like wallahi, I can say I haven't been thinking about myself. It was always like, what can I do for the movement? What can I do for the movement? The moment I did choose to leave, it was like a moment of like, okay, let me think about me in this moment. And how
Yeah.
can I like preserve myself,
Yeah,
in a strategic retreat that I can still, because again, Palestinian advocacy does not start and stop in America,
absolutely
right?
not.
It does not, it doesn't stop and start, especially at Cornell anyway. So it's a global struggle, and it needs an international dimension anyway.
Yeah,
So for me, it was like, yeah. So I think why I took the risk though, honestly, man, I feel like I'd never think I'm gonna, if I reach the age of 80, I'm never gonna think to myself, oh, why did you go so hard for Palestine? Like, that's not even a question for me because I think the images that I've seen again and still continue to see, I can't. If I sat back and said nothing and did nothing,
yeah,
I don't think I could live with myself.
yeah.
I don't think I
Now,
could live with myself. I really couldn't.
well, I suppose it's the other. We're talking obviously you and I at a time
Yeah.
where what's happening to you and others feels a little bit like there's an attempt to create a climate of fear, right?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering because obviously you're both a victim of this situation, but you're also probably somebody who wouldn't think of themselves as a victim,
Yeah.
and I would imagine has your own analysis of the juncture that we're at. So, with everything you know about social movements, about resistance movements, what do you make of the moment that we're
Yeah.
in right now and what's happening to you and others? How do you
Absolutely.
analyze it?
I think Zionism is the weakest it's ever been. I don't think it's a position of strength. I think the kind of Gramscian notion of power, right? When power has to show itself, right? Power is the strongest when it's like
Concealed.
concealed, hidden, right? When it has to show itself, that's not a position of strength. And I think on the ideological front,
Mm,
we're never going back.
mm,
Zionism is lost, right? It's not to say that we've won the fight right now. We
no.
haven't, but I've never personally been more sure of Palestinian liberation ever in my life. And this is like, I think people need to like, this is not for me a fad. As I said, I just Googled, not Googled, I Facebooked my name like Palestine and Momodou Taal. And I was talking about Palestine from like 2008 when I was like 15 years old.
Yes.
I mean, this is not like a new thing for me, right? But honestly, knowing what I know of the struggle, I don't think like, I don't think we're ever going back. I don't think Zionism can ever recover from this, personally. And I think it's a shame to see like Zionism is obviously a form of like white supremacy and Jewish supremacy, but I think it's a shame to see that the Zionists don't realize aligning with the right-wing forces right now in the state is going to backfire so heavily on them.
How so?
Like it's gonna I think because the right wing doesn't have loyalty like that to the Zionist project like that. The minute it becomes too much of an inconvenience, the minute it becomes like again, even when Trump posted that nonsense video of Riviera in Gaza, his own supporters were like, "We didn't vote for this. We thought it was a MAGA, Make America Great Again. It's not Israel first, right?"
Hmm.
And that's sentiment of right wing. And far be it from me to ever talk about Candace Owens, but again, you're seeing Tucker Carlson. There's a real kind of shift even in right-wing spaces towards Israel.
Yes. Yes, for
So I feel
sure.
like, yeah,
And I suppose what's also interesting is we're talking at a time where Trump has just been given his marching orders from the administration, and I think many of us sort of suspected that it was inevitable with
yeah,
the size of both those men's egos in one room. It was bound to happen.
yeah,
But I guess what you're saying is that there's something about the right and its alliance with Zionism, which is kind of convenient in the moment, if
yeah.
it's convenient in the moment. So how do you read this moment in terms of I think a lot of people are feeling very tired, are feeling like very, you mentioned like the sort of shame that I think a lot of us are feeling like we marched, we campaigned, we spoke out, people feel like they have taken all kinds of, risks on the sliding scale of risk. I mean, your end and those who are currently in ICE detention, obviously
Yeah.
being some of the hardest end of the wedge, all the way to obviously Palestinians
Yeah.
themselves on the front line. Um, and yet, every day we are watching children, beheaded babies,
Mhm.
but this is actual beheaded
Yeah.
Palestinian
Yeah.
babies. And nothing feels like it's changing. It feels, in fact, like there's a hardening
Yeah.
of the position of those in power. So, what is your message to those who are reading this and thinking, I need to maybe sit tight, go a bit quiet. Maybe we shouldn't go out and protest. Maybe we shouldn't speak up because it's getting more and more dangerous. What would you say to people who are feeling like that right now?
I think two things I would say. I think first and foremost, it's important that we believe Palestine is going to be free. You have to believe that. If you don't believe that, then I don't think you're going to have the strength or like the resolve to even carry on another day. You have to really sincerely believe that Palestine is going to be free within our lifetime. And I think that needs to be fundamentally our backdrop. And actually, I'll say three things. Second thing is, yes, we can talk about fatigue and all these things, but the Palestinians have been waging the struggle for more than 76 years. And they haven't given up on the prospect of their liberation. If anything, they've doubled down and continued to go hard. And thirdly, I'll say this is where our history needs to be read. You spoke about resistance movements. 40,000 more were killed in Sétif and Guetta in Algeria, for example, right? We've seen liberation in Mozambique with the Portuguese. We've seen time and time again imperialism lashing out, committing massacres, but the colonized still won, right? So Palestine will not be the exception. So I feel like it's just a matter of time, and I think we just have to keep like digging deep and find community, be with people who like have that same conviction of you as well. And again, I'm not saying again, I would never say to anyone you have to do what I did, because again, everyone has different level of risk, and I also understand that, you know, I have a British passport. If I was going to get deported, I'm going back to the UK. And I have a support network. And life, you know, alhamdulillah, I have a lot of faith in Allah. Like Allah will always come through for me, right? But I would say that we need to like lose our fear. We have to lose our fear. Not to say you've got to take the risk. Everyone can assess what they can do, but the fear we have to lose, man. Because again, right now, as I said earlier, they're relying on the chaos and fear to chill people and get people to shut up. So finally, I'll just say that like yeah, we'll just carry on, man. Just really carry on. But I think we need to have a lot of introspection as a movement. But I do think we need to just like now is not the time for me to retreat. For me, it will be to double down and escalate and go even harder, if I'm being
Mm.
honest.
Yeah, no, I thought that might be the case. And so, on that note, you've obviously spoken a lot previously about the parallels between like Black liberation and Palestinian liberation, but we don't actually hear those connections made very often in the mainstream.
Mhm.
Um, what connections would you make between those movements,
Yeah.
particularly at this time? And given the title of your podcast, the
Mhm.
Malcolm effect, what would Malcolm say right now? Like, what would Malcolm be calling us on people who follow him, who today admire him and
Yeah.
say, oh, Malcolm X is my hero? Well, what do you think he'd be saying as someone who studied him in depth?
It's so interesting you said that because a lot of journalists, again in America, they would ask me, "You're Gambian, British. Why are you so like interested in Palestine?" I'm just like, it's because that I'm Gambian and it's because that I'm black that I sent to Palestinian liberation. Like, of course. And I think it's very important to know about Malcolm. The day Malcolm was assassinated, he sent a letter condemning Zionism. The day he was assassinated. So that's one of Malcolm's last messages to the world.
Mm.
And he was we already know his famous article on Zionist logic, right? But he has a very like again on the final day, on the day, literally the day he was killed, he has a letter that went out where he's condemning Zionism and asking for the Arabs to rise up, etc., etc. So my point is that like for those who see Malcolm as a hero, should understand that he was an internationalist, he was anti-Zionist, he believed in Palestinian liberation. And I think the Black radical tradition, which I attach myself to, have always centered Palestine in that struggle from the Black Panthers, from Kwame Ture. Like literally, I don't know a stronger and more of an ardent anti-Zionist than Kwame Ture in 20th century in America. Like, he risked everything. He also had to leave as well, because of state persecution. So I say that fundamentally. I've always said this, and people have been a bit like, oh, but I said for me, to be pro-Black is to be anti-Zionist.
Mm.
So that's how I see it.
Do you think that people up until this time have thought that you could protest the genocide safely, meaning that you could do it without any risks to self and livelihood? And do you think maybe part of the mask that's fallen is that actually we're coming up against like the naked face of power?
Yeah,
And does power ever concede power without counter power,
exactly.
Mamadou?
Absolutely, it doesn't, all right? And the thing is, I think you're right. I think people, because we are, for all intents and purposes, neoliberal subjects, we can't escape where we've been raised up, right? So we kind of almost many people buying to liberal notions of change. You can vote in a revolution, you can vote in these things, you can just have to pass a bill. But I think people need to realize it's not an issue like again, this is not to a hierarchy of oppression, a hierarchy of issues. But this Palestinian struggle gets at the heart of empire. It's not a cursory issue that we can kind of like, through DEI fix, for example, right? It's like, no, Palestine challenges the foundations of USA as a settler colony. And because of that, the USA, it builds itself in a certain way and reproduces itself in a certain way and projects its power in a certain way. So because of that, you're like any challenge to that is going to be even a minimal challenge to that is going to be met with so much force and so much power. So fundamentally, we're at a stage where if we're going to upend US imperialism and Zionism, we're going to need an equivalent kind of force. And that can only come through the global majority, through an internationalist position. Through the, again, even though in the US we might be a minority who are pro-Palestinian, but we have to realize around the world we're the majority. So again, linking these connections, and this is what the Black Panther understood and so many others understood as well.
And so can I just ask you about, because obviously you were touching on something that's been really core to my thinking in the last couple of weeks. I think when I saw the resumption of the violence in Gaza and the fact that all the avenues that we've exercised have felt like they've not led to what we would expect in a democratic society, part of me felt like, hold on, when you live in a world where you're told that your vote matters, but it doesn't because lobby groups and their funding matters more. When you're told that you have the right to protest, but actually when you do go out and protest, it moves and changes nothing, and you have to ask permission, and you have to do it within these boundaries, and you can't be disruptive, etc. When you start to understand that speaking up is going to be penalized, you begin to see the dismantling of the sort of facade of a democratic society that you believe to be a participant in. And I'm just wondering, for me, that led to a bit of a crisis moment because I've been the person up until now saying, sign the petition, take to the streets, write to your MP. I don't know if I believe in any of that anymore, Momodou. I don't know. So where are you on that? And if that isn't the route anymore, what is?
That's a brilliant question. I think for me, that question is determined by where you are geographically. I think, don't get me wrong, if it's for me, I'm all for revolution. I want a total upending of Western society, right? That's what I think. But I understand the conditions don't permit for that right now, right? In terms of like, as in like, we need to do a lot of political education, a lot of work. But I think where we got to start now, if we're talking about what we realize the issue, you're absolutely right. The system is never designed to undo itself. So if they give you petitions, if they give you writing to the MP, it's never going to undo itself. At most, you're going to get some kind of liberal reform. If we're talking about upending society and real transformation that we want to see whilst living in the imperial core global north, then we have to organize. I mean like real community on the ground organizing to the fact that like, we can come together as a contingent and where our withdrawal of labor, for example, our withdrawing of certain institutions actually harms the state, actually harms like that's the only thing they understand. You withdraw that as a, for example, up until now, I really can't understand why has there not been a nationwide Muslim strike in the US?
Or the
That
UK
would,
for
or
that
the
matter.
UK, or the UK, exactly. Can you think about the taxis, restaurants, on the tube, all where Muslims are, especially in like major cities, we could bring them to a standstill. We really could.
I mean, we
Why
would
haven't
get
we
accused
would?
of being terrorists if we did that, but
Yeah, I know, I know. But I feel like yeah, we would. But I think they call us that anyway at this point. So, but I just said
yeah.
to say like something like that could be effective. And I find I'm just a bit. Why haven't the Masajid even called for that yet?
Have the masajids called for anything is the
Nope.
question. And I think this, I mean, this would take us into another podcast. I'd love to talk to you about, as Muslims,
Yeah.
specifically how we have been so disillusioned by the lack of leadership at
Yeah.
this time when it's never been more urgent. Like it's broken my heart how we've got through an entire Ramadan and that we haven't seen an upheaval like what we thought Islam was, just like fasting,
Yeah.
like being hungry maybe a little bit and thirsty during the day, a couple of like heads down down when you can, dear Lord. Momodou, our time together is coming to an end, but I want to thank you so much for talking with me today. I want to say stay safe,
Thank you.
and we hope to speak again when you are back in the UK.
And I hope to see you soon.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Be safe, Momodou. Take
Thank you.
care.
Take care.
And
Bye.
thanks everyone for watching.